Thank you, Ken. Thank you all for being here. Just a real quick remarks, just to give you some context for this. If you haven't been here before, this is, I think, our third or fourth year of doing this particular forum. And it started about 3 or 4 years ago when we started bringing in some guest editors to edit Media Magazine, because we're just journalists, we're not practitioners, and we thought it'd be fun to tap some of the intellect and mindsets in the industry to tell us where the future was going. And it started with Bob Guccione Jr., who was a professional editor at the time, who kind of gave us a vision. And every year since, we brought in a new guest editor. We had Alex Bogusky last year. This year we have David Skopner from Huge. If you don't know about them, you should read this issue. And the important thing is that they all bring a vision for where the industry is going. And when we put this particular forum together, we tried to bring an eclectic mix of personalities from digital media, traditional media, but also, really importantly, from Madison Avenue, because the one thing that the marketing industry and agencies bring is a real perspective on the consumers. Remember, there are really only 3 ways that media content gets funded. I pay, you pay, or someone else pays. So either the consumer's paying directly with premium subscriptions, or some kind of commerce is taking place. And in the old model, it was advertising. In the new model, we're still trying to work through it. So we're going to have some very influential folks here explaining how they see those models progressing. One thing I do want to say is we do cover the future of media every day, almost every second at Media Post. But we're looking very near term. You know, we're looking at the trees. So it's really fun to step back, look at the broad perspective of where we're going. Not the long, long distant future, but you know, things that are going to change in the next 18 months that are going to transform our media economy. So the group we brought together is very eclectic. I'll go through them really quickly. Really importantly, we have people from Madison Avenue who understand where the consumer purchasing perspective is going, because that's still an important part of the equation. So we have Trevor Kaufman, who's CEO of Schematic, leading design agency, an interactive agency owned by WPP Group, doing very futuristic things with how people engage with media. Laura Lang, who's CEO of Digitas, the flagship digital enterprise within Publicis Group, really far future thinkers in terms of how consumers are engaging with digital media and traditional media. John Ross, who's president of the Interpublic Emerging Media Lab. Actually, he's now president of Shopper Science, which is a new division of Interpublic that's really focused on understanding, you know, when the consumer gets into the store and starts grabbing those things off the shelf, you know, what led to that decision and what influences happened that kind of made them want to grab that product versus another. Something important to consider. We have Paul Rossi, who's managing director and executive vice president of The Economist Group, a leading content publisher. Hillary Schneider, who's executive vice president Americas region for Yahoo, a leading digital publisher and portal. Evan Williams, co-founder, CEO of Twitter. I don't think I need to explain that, but I don't have 140 characters worth saying. Fred Wilson, co-founder of Union Square Ventures, one of the leading VCs in Silicon Valley, and you see all the activity going on this week. I hope he talks a little bit about that. I'm kind of curious. We have Michael Wolff, founder of Newser, columnist for Vanity Fair, one of the great antagonists in our industry who really kind of pushes the discussion. I'm glad he's on the panel today. And Lauren Selznick, who's the president of NBC Universal's Women in Lifestyle Entertainment Group. So with that context and background, I'd like to introduce Andrew Hayward, who is, you know, one of the preeminent advisors of media companies, big and small, right now, helping them steer their way through this. Of course, he's the former president of CBS News and a great moderator. So I'd really like to introduce Andrew. They're all going to come out now. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Will everybody get set? You hear me okay? Yeah. Everybody sit down. Welcome. Joe made it easy by introducing everybody. So for those of you keeping score at home, we're in alphabetical order here. So we have Trevor, Laura, John, Paul, Hillary, Evan, Fred, Michael, and Lauren. It's a large panel for a large topic, the future of media. So what we thought we would do is have a very simple format. Everybody will do 10 minutes of opening remarks. I'll do closing remarks, and then we'll stop for your coffee break. No, it's not really good. I asked everybody to just think about opening remarks somewhere between 140 characters and 2 minutes. And I gave them a choice of 6 things. They can take any combination of them to talk about. One would be a trend that presents a great opportunity to their current business model, or the reverse, a trend that represents a great threat. Another would be a company that is very hot now, that's going to be yesterday's news in 2 years, or the reverse, a company that we haven't even heard about now that's going to be, let's say, the Twitter of tomorrow. And then my favorite is a cliche or piece of conventional wisdom, something like content is king, that a lot of people subscribe to now, that's going to no longer be applicable in a couple of years, or the reverse of that, something that will be conventional wisdom in a couple of years that we're not even thinking about now. So with that in mind, what we're going to do is go right down the row. We're going to hear from our panelists, and after that, we hope to have a lively, interactive, fast-paced discussion. And with about 20 to 30 minutes to go, we're going to bring you into it. So please think about your questions as we go along. We want to include the group in our discussion of the future of media. So Trevor, let's start with you.
Okay, does this work? How do I do
Yes,
this?
pull a little bit towards you.
I've never, these threats to my business model, I've never had my last name be the first in the alphabet, starting with K. This is a twist for
By
me.
the way, the only reason I'm the moderator is I'm the first in the alphabet here. Paul
So
Allen couldn't do it.
I don't know really what category what I think about a lot falls in. I think 1994, Nicholas Negroponte said, everything that can be digital will be. And that seems so obvious to us now, but what's never obvious is when that's really going to happen. And there's as we've seen one medium after another become more digital, book retailing becomes digital, and then the books themselves become digital. TV really strikes me as the medium that has not yet really gotten there in terms of digital distribution, even though it is there in terms of digital production. And when I think about conventional wisdom, I think about everybody sort of poo-pooing interactive television and on-demand television. Right now, the TV market and the cable companies are actually doing very well. But when I see Comcast now, to me, a lot of cable companies are our clients at Schematic. I see a business model so much like the way AOL was, where you're paying one company who manages the content, the advertising, the access, et cetera. And I think that at some point when we least expect it, that's going to become disaggregated, whether it's through an Apple TV or a Google TV or some kind of in-device chip. So I don't know exactly what question that's answering, but that's the thing I think is sort of most ripe to occur.
Well, in the spirit of what I think about a lot, the answer is consumer behavior, because I believe consumer behavior is way out ahead of the way the media and marketers are acting and where they're spending their money today. I think it's a dislocation that is going to have to be changed. And I believe that we, as a marketing and media community, are completely underestimating the role that mobile and social are going to play. The one thing that never changes, no matter what happens, is the way people feel about the need to be social. It's like the air we breathe. It's a connection that has to happen. What changes is the technology underneath it. And the technology that is coming in terms of our mobile devices, everything from those things we hold in our hands that today we call phones, all the way to the next generation of iPad and tablet devices, are going to change the way that we engage and interact with entertainment, news, content. So what will be profoundly different for all of us, sooner than I think we even understand, is that we will no longer talk about social as a channel. We will no longer talk about mobile as this thing we should think about later. Mobile and social are inextricably intertwined, and it's going to be the way that we engage, that we communicate, and it will redefine the nature of engagement with consumers.
So I run something called Shopper Sciences for Interpublic, and the Emerging Media Lab, which is a think tank, a research center. It's actually a physically working lab. It's about the size of a regular suburban home, filled with the latest kinds of technologies you can imagine, everything from 3D to mobile to advanced technology we can't show you because it's hidden in a secret room, and everything in between. So of course, representing the topic I want to address today is coupons. The world's largest marketers come to the lab, and they come and stand in the midst of all this technology, and they want to have access to the data that we have. We're doing thousands and thousands of shopper interviews every week, and we say, what keeps you up at night? What are you worried about? What are you trying to do? And the number one answer is, can't I just disintermediate that mean retailer and get straight down to the consumer? How do I do a digital coupon? How can I get a coupon on a phone? And we say, wow, really? Is that it? I mean, we're talking about one of the world's most sophisticated devices, this incredibly powerful technology that literally is on my body, literally physically can go inside my body in a way that other technologies can't, and all you want to do is do 30 cents off. And then the retailers come to us, or the auto dealer associations or the pharmacies or whatever, and they come and they do the same tour, and they go through the same kind of data, and you say, what are you trying to do? And we get a list of what they're trying to do. You know, often marketers, you know, what's written at the top of the creative brief is what I'm trying to accomplish, what I want to do. I want to manipulate this consumer to behave the way I want. If there's one, Laura asked me before we walked up, what's one of the things that surprised me in my full 14 months with the lab, and I tell you, one of the biggest ahas has been how humble I feel in the face of the shopper themselves. This incredibly powerful consumer who knows more about the products and services than the associate in the store, or the gentleman at the auto dealership, or in some cases the pharmacist. That their need to understand and feel empowered, and whether they did that research before they showed up in the midst of the transaction, or whether they bring a device along that allows them to do it in the moment, this voracious demand for information, and in absence of the brands and the retailers delivering that information to them, they're seeking out each other increasingly. Do a lot of conversation about the growth of technology. And technology is, in fact, on say, social media, for example. And I think while the technology's been the facilitator, the real issue there is in the absence of serving those shoppers' needs, they're going to each other. The number one topic for moms talking to each other isn't how to get your kid to go to bed at night, or how to deal with a smart-mouthed teenager, or any of the kinds of things you would think parents would want to talk about. 70% of the conversations about products and acquisition, and how to spend your money efficiently. Being humble in the face of this changing technology, we could so easily go out and embrace it in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, and yet we live in this incredible world. The trend I see is a flip around from marketing, from push marketing, to this kind of listening marketing, letting the shoppers educate us, and flipping it around in a world where it may be incredibly easy, in fact, to be successful, harnessing that in order to help us make those shoppers feel smarter.
So I come at this as a media owner in terms of having a magazine and a website. And the two things that I look at, which are both, I think, long-term and short-term, whether you think of mobile as devices, but principally mobile and devices bundled up together. And if I look at the data, what you're seeing at the moment for the first time is a substitution of people giving up one form of reading The Economist, as an example, or magazines in general, and reading it on another product, i.e. digital. So there was a piece of research done recently amongst business travellers by Business Traveller magazine, and they asked them simply, do you have an iPad? And this is in the UK, where it's a little bit later adoption. Do you have an iPad? Are you thinking of buying one? So 16% said I have one, and 13% said I'm thinking of buying one. So that's 30% are already owning these devices. You see it with Kindle. I think the Kindle pricing will come down again before the holidays potentially, and that will suddenly become the gift that every dad gets on Father's Day because you don't know what to buy him, or every Uncle George gets on his birthday because you don't know what to buy him. So I think we have to accept that these devices are taking off. So the change in behaviour of consumers in terms of reading magazines is a definite issue for us. And the other thing I think is, you look at mobile, and we sit in the US, but I'll just give you a couple of interesting numbers. If you look at BRIC, Brazil, India, China, Russia, if you add Indonesia on there, which becomes BRICy, which isn't very exciting, but just imagine that gets added on the end there. There are over 3 billion people there in those communities, of which today only 450 million are online with a PC, but there's 1.2 million cell phones. And India takes off, 3G takes off in India this year. So I think you're going to see this incredible explosion of online media consumption in various forms, and I think it is text, not just web. But I think certainly for us as a global media company, the geography of the world is very much changing, and you're seeing mobile devices as being a leapfrog for people to consume media in a different way. So those are the two things.
Well, in thinking about it in honor of Adweek, I think the adage that I would go to is the traditional adage of marketers, which is, I know that only 50% of my marketing works, but I don't know which 50%. And I think that was kind of a funny thing people said 20 years ago. I think today marketers don't find that amusing. And I think that a year or two from now, it will absolutely not be true. I think you're already starting to see that today. And I think as you think about that ability for marketers to really understand how they can reach their target audience, it will have huge impacts in terms of how media and media consumption happens and gets funded.
Yep.
So, in terms of trends, I would pile on to what Laura said about mobile specifically. It's an easy one. Everyone knows that mobile is the future of everything, but I think the implications aren't fully appreciated, and we don't know what all those implications are, but a couple of that come to mind for us. And mobile is, to answer the question, what's exciting for our business. Twitter is started on mobile. It's all about conciseness and immediacy, so that's one of the reasons we're excited about it. But I also think it's going to lead to a lot more media consumption, even more than we're seeing now. The iPad and other devices are interesting, but I think they'll be dwarfed by smartphones, which are still growing like crazy. And it's not the iPhone that's going to take over the world, but Android phones are going to be selling for $50, and everybody's going to have those, which is going to drive tons and tons of online web usage. But the web is not really prepared for mobile. It's either from a user experience standpoint or a monetization standpoint. But I think, so there's going to be lots of changes in what people consume over mobile will not be the same as they consume on the web. A, and B, the advertising models on mobile, I think there's actually an opportunity to do a lot better for a bunch of reasons. One is people will be more likely to be logged in on a mobile device, and you'll know more about them, such as location. But I think what it's going to force is advertising models that are actually helpful and respectful to users. And so advertising is designed with the same consciousness of product and content design, and that's what will make it work, because people don't have the patience for anything else.
Well, I'm thinking about all the same things that everybody else is thinking about up here, but
That's the problem with having W. You know, it's hard for you, Michael, let alone Lauren with a Z.
exactly. Lauren's not going to be happy. One thing that I think a lot about as it relates to media is the way that media is infiltrating every business. And what I mean by that, I'll use myself as an example. I'm an investor. The way I make money is that I invest in companies like Twitter. They become successful. Our stock appreciates, and that's how we make money. And what I've been doing as an investor for almost the past decade is using technology that Ev invented, blogging, and pretending that I'm Michael. And I write a column every single day at abc.com, and about 150,000 people a month come to abc.com and read that. These are people who I may want to invest in. It makes it easier for me to invest in them. But that's my issue. That relates to my business. But as it relates to media, this is also media that I'm creating. It may be bad media, it may be good media, maybe mediocre media, but the reality is that as more and more people who have businesses that aren't traditionally seen as media use media to do their business, we have an explosion of media. And I think a lot of media is getting created today that never existed before that is actually very good. And it doesn't need to have a business model. at least it doesn't need to have a traditional business model. And I think that's new and different and important.
Fred, just explain that for another 30 seconds when you say it doesn't need to have a traditional business model.
Well, I don't need to run advertising on it. I don't need to do any of the things that a traditional publisher would need to do. I don't need to monetize it. I produce it myself, and
it serves another function for you.
it serves another function for me. But it is media, and I think there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people who are doing this now. And there's a lot of really great media that's getting created. And it's being surfaced up in places like Twitter and Facebook and Google Reader and other aggregators that increasingly are going to filter that down. And I think it's very challenging for traditional media companies to compete with that. And I think that places like finance and technology and maybe a few other areas are where we're seeing that happen most. We see it's happening the most right now, but I don't think any sector is going to be spared from this.
Michael.
I think one of the things that's consistently most interesting to me is our collective inability to grasp the kind of change that we're experiencing. We sit in this building which is mostly occupied by a company that can't fathom the fact that it probably won't be here in the form that it's in within a relatively short time, and most of us here can't fathom that fact.
Should be okay till the end of the panel, by the way, so don't worry about it.
That these institutions which we've grown up with and have dominated our business no longer will dominate our business. That's simple but transformative. We're in the midst of something nothing less than industrial transformation, in which everything will change. Not only everything will change, but all the faces will change, and that's a key point. The people in charge now will not be in charge, but it's not only a shift in who's in control. It's a shift in where that power flows from. So the most elemental thing that's happened over the last decade or last 12 years is the fact that power has passed to the consumer. It's the greatest time in the world for a consumer of media. It happens to be the worst time in the world for the providers, the producers, and distributors of media. We are in this moment in which we've seen a sort of coming apart of the historic partnership between marketing and media. And that's not so much the detriment of marketers, which are finding enormous other ways to find an audience, although obviously they have their issues and their problems too. But it's devastating to the media business. One of the interesting things I think that's happening now is the war for control of video. It would be impossible to say who's going to be running the video business, who's going to getting the biggest piece of the video dollar, who's going to be bringing that video into your home or into your laptop. Actually, it would be impossible to say on what screen that video is going to come. But he who controls the video used to be Dick Tracy, and when I was a kid it said, "He who controls gravity controls the universe." He who controls video controls the universe. But then it's not only the traditional media business which is in a state of radical transformation. The new media business is also in a state of radical transformation. So the idea which would have been prevalent probably a year ago that Google was unassailable is not an idea that anyone would subscribe to anymore. We have suddenly seen the new media business in a moment where all of these fiefdoms or dukedoms or new imperial states are rising, from Facebook to Apple to Netflix to Twitter to a company that I was actually just at a dinner the other night, this company Spotify, which will shortly come to the US and be potentially an iTunes killer. It's it's the most extraordinary and exciting period that I could ever imagine, and I'm grateful to be able to make a buck off of telling everybody that they're going to be out of a job.
Lauren?
Instead of death by 1,000 paper cuts, this is like a firing squad by 9 people, smarty pants. So, first of all, traditional news guy, traditional media gal have these analog retardo microphones, and the cool kids have their So I think that's a statement, not about alphabetical order. The 9 bullets out of the assassination team, I will let Comcast know that their business model is faulty as soon as I get the legal chance to do so. I'm glad you're going to make all my content for me, and I'm glad I won't ever get any money for it again and have the wrong feeling about who controls video. That aside, I would say that 2 things. I think the thing about trends, I'm also a longstanding teacher's pet, so I'm going to answer the teacher's favorite question. The phrases of today and the language that drives these kinds of discussion, I'm going to go to a really resilient one that people insist on saying now that's really not relevant today, that will be even less relevant, which is, when's it on? And another one that kind of plagues these kinds of panels, and I hope we don't get diverted by the question today, how do you define your company? As a media company or a content company? As a media company or a technology company? Not so relevant. It seemed like a new question. It never was. So I think both of those, old school question, new school question, not too relevant today, much less relevant later. And most of all, I think that the conversation is so exciting about trying to predict the future. It's such an unusual time for so many people at so many different levels to be trying to get out in front of what's happening to them today. And I kind of have this fundamental belief that if you can just look back, maybe 100 years ago when most people took trains or horses somewhere, and some people had these, clunky things with 4 wheels and a crank on the front. And the people who made all of that had to decide in advance, am I in the horse and carriage business? Am I in the train business? Or am I in the business of getting people to the place they want to go, when they want to go, not on my train schedule, easier, don't have to feed the horse, and faster. Car goes faster than horse, not as fast as train, but on my schedule. So I got to decide, I got to convince my current owners and my new soon-to-be owners, what kind of business are they in? Are they in the square box on a console business? Are they in the storytelling business? Are they in the most expedient delivery of exciting and dynamic and compelling content business? And that's the story of the future. And my last thing is, I'm going to offer you up a drinking game just for this morning. Water, coffee, or booze if you have it. Anyone who begins their sentence, their answer, with the word "so," take a drink, because I'm not in that digital club yet, and there's a clear line of who's cool and who's not. I'm not yet cool. anyone who starts their sentence, you'd have 4 shots down the hatch if you did that game by this answer.
Could I make a point here? 'Cause
Please.
I think that's an interesting metaphor in terms of industrial transformation. Which business are you in? And what we know largely from the history of industrial transformation is that you can't make that decision. Is that the business you are in is the business that you are fated to, and somebody else, because they have different skill sets and different temperament, gets to be the guy who runs the auto business instead of the buggy business.
But don't we make a little too much out of fate sometimes? I think we're always saying things are changing, there's this crazy change, we're underestimating the degree of change, and all of that is true. But the web was around for 10 years before, you know, Evan and Biz started Twitter, before there was a Facebook, or before. I think there's a lot of, you know, Amazon is a e-commerce platform. Is it the perfect e-commerce platform? Is it exactly the right one that has now created the paradigm for every other e-commerce site? Or was there some degree of authorship that made that change? So I think I think one of the things that is exciting is we're not purely fated to, while the consumer is tremendously powerful, they also still are in the position of getting, even if it starts in a garage, they're the recipients of what's invented. So there still is a certain amount of, it's not a predestined, predetermined world that we're in.
Well, so to the degree that leadership is going to be influential, and certainly the people on the stage are going to play a role in that, there does seem to be a tension between traditional models, which are still remarkably resilient, and these emerging models for content distribution and marketing that we've been talking about. We're just past the beginning of the television season. It strikes me that those tropes really haven't changed very much. Same kind of programming, same kind of promotion, same kind of adoption by marketers. There's still the need for scale, for comment culture, for products we've been consuming for a long time. So listening to this set of opening remarks, you think, well, all of that, you know, forget about it, but in fact, managing the tension between what works now and has worked and what's going to emerge strikes me as an important role for these leaders. What would you say, you know, Laura, starting with you, what do you think marketers, I guess, do you agree that, or do you feel marketers have moved quickly enough to this new world? And are they leading or following?
I won't use the word so.
We all were going to until you said that. Now we're terribly self-conscious.
I wasn't going to, but now I want to. Okay.
I'm going to say so just so that the people can drink.
I agree. They missed 4 shots.
What is happening now that I believe we're missing is that we now need a return to really good marketing. In the early days of marketing, it was about what does a consumer want? What is a consumer doing? How do we best fill that need? Today we get so excited about a new piece of technology or some new behaviors. Really, this should be the most exciting time for marketing, because what needs to happen is to go back to where is a customer or a consumer on their journey? What is a mom doing all day? You know, what is someone who is leading in the B2B space, whose job it is to actually get new leads or new customers for a company? Where are they? What do they need? What content do they want to consume? Whether it's for fun or for entertainment. And we make a lot about this tension when really what should happen is we should go back and say there are great roles for broadcast media in sharing a mass message, in building brands, in tapping into culture. But there are also incredibly important new ways for us to get inside that journey and understand where someone is as they walk down the street. A phone, a smartphone, is an extension of your body. This is with you all the time. It's a part of where you are, it's a part of how you communicate, it's a part of how you consume. We need to rewrite the customer journeys and say, where are people and how do we create experiences as marketers that will grab them where they are? It's not one thing. It's not that simple.
Yeah, but aren't you essentially saying that? I mean, that's the old way of looking at this. The marketers, there's the consumer, the customer, the consumer there, and the marketer just has to find a way to give the message.
Oh, absolutely not.
Without acknowledging the fact that one of the messages that has been sent is that the consumer doesn't really want your messages, and the consumer is more skilled at avoiding your messages than ever before. And the consumer is in a state of not just rebellion, but greater savviness than you.
The mistake is thinking marketing is messages. Marketing no longer equals messages at all. Marketing is about inspiring people to engage in whatever way it works for them.
That's what we in my business would call a message, by the way.
Right.
Lauren and then Hillary.
I would say that the whole medium of communication through content going in front of consumers is relatively new, right? Films are about 100 years old. Very new, at most, right? 80 years old, 90 years old. TV is really new. It's not like we're busting, down Euripides and, plays aren't going to work anymore. It's brand new. So advertising's even newer, and I would argue that the onset of digital, the rise of Web 1.0, set advertising back and set the markets back to the beginning, because idiotically we insisted, the digital world insisted, the market that got created went back to the basest form of advertising, direct marketing, as its paradigm. So a long time ago, people valued 1-800-mattress because it's late at night. That's what you run in late night. It's cheap, it's easy. People are in bed, and they're like, oh, my mattress is uncomfortable. I'm gonna call right now, and I don't have the money, but it's $5 down, and I get a paring knife with it. Okay, that's ridiculous. But that was the metric of success for a banner ad, click-through rates. Oh, I feel like I'm searching sleep problems. If I don't feel like buying a new mattress right now, that ad didn't work and I'm not going to pay you for it. And that's direct marketing, long time, worst advertising on TV. That was the paradigm of digital. So we set back the thing called, you can put bad names on it, you can put good names on it, it's the same words, branding, brand loyalty, marketing, not advertising. But we are all talking about people loving products. And new people are going to love new products. Some people are going to be loyal to old products. And that was a relationship, a long-time relationship, Coke, Pepsi, with your thing that you remember when you're 8 years old at your ball game with your dad, or with your first boyfriend, took a sip, had your first kiss, whatever their thing was to evoke. That was a relationship. So I would argue that the rise of digital set us back in terms of what the market that was created at the price it was created for the basest and least effective form of advertising. And now we have to rebuild this relationship, and it's not going to happen overnight because the iterations of it are argued about, and a market is created every year in the upfront. Digital has still not entered the upfront market, so no one will bet on a future, right? It's all about futures. It's all scatter. It's all in the quarter. Forget about in the quarter, for the quarter. In the week, for the week. In a granular, low-end form of engagement with consumers, and I think we got to get way beyond that.
Hillary,
But
one second, John. Sorry, Hillary. Go ahead.
I would respectfully disagree. I would say that there is, the whole internet is 15 or 16 years old. That's phenomenal. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. And the rate at which marketers are embracing this is really a lean forward attitude. And the analogy I would draw is that marketers have a historical tradition of really creating the programming that's going to matter most. So if you think about Procter & Gamble created the soap opera because when TV came about, they didn't have the medium to really have context that they wanted their message in that would make that emotional connection. And if you look at what the top brands are doing right now, and Laura could talk to this, and I'm sure many others could, is they're really trying to understand the idea that they don't have to reach all the consumers, they can reach their consumers, and they know a boatload about their consumers. And so they can begin to think about how do they create the content that is the context that they want to put their brand against.
I totally agree. To me, that's a different issue. I think it's about life stage, about finding the right people to be advocates for your brand and your product and your content.
And they're creating that programming.
But
I
there's
agree.
also
I'm just about deployment and what the expectation is and the value placed on it in the market called advertising.
But
It's
the-
advertising week. It's not content week.
the fundamental point that you just made here, that this is a medium that's 15 or 16 years old, and I guess your point was it's grown so fast, and but that's not true. That in fact consumers have used this medium, but marketers have been very wary of it. I mean, the marketers rushed into television at a much faster rate. I mean, and so let's get to the nut graph here, which is that we've built a medium which is fundamentally supported by marketing, but it's not such a good marketing medium. It doesn't really work, or it doesn't work as well as other mediums have worked, or we haven't found the key to unlock what makes it work. And we're all sitting here, both marketers and media people, a kind of stymied. We don't know how to really make a big buck here.
And much of the content.
That's because we
Oh, go
haven't
ahead.
tried, right? We're using old-fashioned monetization models in a new medium. When LeBron James writes a tweet that he liked the new Universal Studios movie, and Universal Studios goes into Twitter and sponsors that tweet and amplifies it, that's a new way to advertise. That's not an old way to advertise. When we start doing that in this medium at scale, we will find that it works. Putting a banner ad in front of somebody or running an interruption video pre-roll, that's dumb. We shouldn't be doing that.
But you know what? LeBron is like television, making his, when he gives up his NBA salary, that's when you can tell me there's a new market created by his paid tweet for a movie.
No, he's not getting paid for that. He watched the movie, he liked the movie, he told his fans he liked the movie. And
Someone might have slipped him a DVD, is all I'm saying.
but I write about stuff every day because I want to connect to my audience. He's doing it because he wants to connect to his audience. He's not doing it because he's getting paid.
And by connecting to his audience, he gets a buck on the jersey that's sold at the NBA store. The guy doesn't like movies that much.
And
Okay, but
respectfully, to jump in.
One at a time. Hold on, Michael, hold on 1 second. Go ahead, Laura, and then we'll get.
Respectfully, two things have been said that I would like to disagree with. One is that content is not advertising, and I would like to actually put forward a point of view that we have the wrong definition of advertising, and that we actually live in a post-advertising world. And it's a world where we have to go to market in different ways. Example, one of the things that Digitas does, we talk to our clients, we say we have to build active brands, not brands. Why is that? Because we don't believe that the world where we could craft a message or even pay someone to do content is the right world. It's a world where the way I consume my content is going to give me a path to feel differently about a brand. And I would argue that the development of content and the way we use content, whether you write it or whether we pay someone to write it, the way as a brand we connect to it, co-opt to it, and share it, becomes part of our post-advertising world. I think the challenge, admittedly, is in the monetization of that for those people who provide content, but as a marketer, since that's not what I think about how do we do this better for brands. Content is very much a part of a post-advertising world, and the fact that we really cannot say it doesn't work. We have brand after brand that has shifted their dollars into new spaces, who is creating new awareness, creating new connections. We have brands right now that are launching with 100% of their marketing budgets in media that this panel would call new media. I find new media an ironic term. I think it's the media that we are using today. And I believe that as leaders, we are going to have to understand that there's a different definition of engagement and communication that goes into building brands. And that's just what I'd like to add.
I just, want to say that, don't forget, I'm I run a huge digital business, and my whole world is about innovating inside all media and causing people to seamlessly, without even knowing it, know that they're consuming something that I don't call new media. I think that it's kind of a beautiful vision to be in this post-advertising world. I think we're actually not there yet. I think you run a digital agency. So until you run an agency, not a digital agency, and the whatever the other agencies are called have the same name, you know, we're still working towards it. And the other thing I just want to say, there's, you know, news people and very creative people on this panel. There is something to be said, actually, to not seek to blend all messaging and marketing and advertising with things that were born creatively and for entertainment purposes or for news purposes. So, you know, many other panels are really, you know, talking about these, you know, I guess the social danger, political danger, moral danger of the total blend of messaging and creative content or news content or information content. And I would just, you know, always seek to balance a complete embrace of the new and innovative and the seamless with the creative forces that are separated from the economic forces of what many of us do.
Well, let's stay on, that. Pardon me. Let's stay on that for a second. Michael wrote an influential piece along with Chris Anderson writing a parallel piece a couple of issues ago in Wired about this trend towards companies that, again, want to control the experience. I don't want to characterize it for you, Michael, but to what extent are content, is traditional content going to remain really important in this new world that we're talking about? Because I agree, I don't think it can all become advertising or even overly blended with advertising. Maybe that's a journalist's perspective, but there does seem to me, maybe backlash is too strong a word, but a trend back towards the opposite of the vision that Fred just shared with us, which is that that AVC is, of course, it's a piece of media, but that it's going to be, you know, that everything is going to be like that. I'm not, you weren't really implying that everything would be, but that there'll be all this media and that there'll be filtering devices like Twitter. It seems to me that the traditional media players are kind of starting to rise again and become, kind of reassert their influence.
Well, they're trying. Will that be successful? We've seen no indication yet of anyone who's you know, waved their fist and has gotten something for it. You know, Rupert has decided that that he's going to make people pay, and he's tried that, and you know what? No one is paying. So, you know, Condé Nast, the company that I work for, is now deciding or is pursuing with some intent and enthusiasm this idea that people will take to reading their magazines in essentially the same as they've always been, but in now suddenly available in tablet form. Will that work? It's totally unclear. My personal bet would be that it won't work. That people want, that the fundamental experience, that the idea that we are now doing, what we're engaged in is essentially filming theater for a video experience, and that was a failure as a video experience.
Paul, can you speak to this? You surely have to wrestle with this issue because you have a very successful business that is now.
But I just touch on a couple of things. We are still in a world where 30% of the average person's time is spent online and 13% of marketing dollars are online. So that gap is going to narrow. Whether you like it or not, it's going to narrow.
Well, how come it hasn't narrowed so far, though? I mean,
well, it has. The graph is growing,
it happened
but it's
much quicker in the television business, and those numbers have been pretty stable now for several years. There is a point of resistance here which we haven't adequately analyzed and certainly have not yet overcome.
Well, I'll leave that to the agency world to answer that, or marketers to answer that. But my view would be that actually it's about how you scale up lots of small ideas around tweeting and blogging and everything else. But so, you know, we do a lot of experimenting online, and you get 7 people who buy something. Well, you know, that's not going to change your business. When I can send out 20 million bits of direct mail and get 7,000. So I think there's a challenge about how you scale up some of these smaller things. But to me, it fundamentally comes back to brands. And whether you are a blogger on ABC, you still have a brand. You have a personal brand, and you have a brand that's giving you permission to talk to an audience. So I think this idea, of content and, it's about brands. If I deliver an Economist video or an Economist audio or an Economist iPad app, and it's coming before anyone asks me in November, if I deliver that, it has to be as good as The Economist. There's no difference to me, but what people are buying is the brand, and they have to pay to engage with the brand. So I think brands are important. And then just, lastly, we don't go and sell advertising anymore. We don't sell advertising. We sit down and talk about taking marketing budget share. So we have conversations. There's probably, if I look at, if 100% of our advertising pitches 2 years ago were about print, now 50% are about print, and everything else is about a combination of 8 other things. Events, social media, Facebook, all these things are part of every conversation we're having. So the world is changing because we have to compete for marketing dollars as a media brand, and I think of ourselves as a media company, and not just advertising dollars, which a year ago we were absolutely doing that.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's a strange assumption to say that the amount of time somebody spends in a given medium and the amount of advertising dollars we allocate to that medium should be exactly parallel, right? Certain media are good for doing certain stuff, right? So TV is great, and TV commercials can be really entertaining. And there's nothing really wrong with that. And that's a much better place. It'd be really irresponsible as an advisor to my clients if I said, really a Coca-Cola style brand, a fast-moving consumer good product should really spend a ton of money online. Because in some cases they can come up with very clever tactics. We can do a lot on their behalf to do things often farther down the purchase funnel, right? When you're interested in consideration and sampling and retention and all the things that we do sort of later on in that customer journey or the customer relationship that Laura talked about. But to say, some of the branded content models people talk about, or to really move too much money into that too soon, it's not necessarily a good idea, because, when we run an ad when we're doing marketing for Dell, I was saying over breakfast, if we can run an ad on CNET that says to somebody who's in market for a PC, you can buy an Inspiron now for $499, that's enormously effective. It doesn't mean that I think they shouldn't do other forms of traditional advertising that have also worked for them in the past, or overweight one just because people are spending more time there. Moreover, as a consumer, I don't necessarily want advertising in every part of my life. So for example, Facebook, I think, was not designed to be a particularly effective advertising medium. I don't think advertising was in Mark Zuckerberg and everybody else's head when they made that up. I think we have to live with that. I think that's okay.
Evan, you've been listening thoughtfully. Your company is sometimes described as a social network or as a media company. What are your thoughts about this? As certainly marketers are eyeing Twitter with great interest, and Fred cited a dramatic example of LeBron James, one of many more to come, I'm sure.
So Twitter wasn't designed as an advertising medium, but it's not a social network. It's commercial messages fit very well in Twitter because it was designed as a one-to-many publishing system. And from the beginning, there have been companies on there who have recognized it's a very useful way to get a message to their constituents. And so we feel very good about the position we're in, because people are opting in to essentially advertisements in mass numbers on Twitter, because it relates to what I was saying earlier about the advertisements actually being helpful and respectful. They're about delivering useful information in a concise and immediate way that helps people make better choices. And so Dell is on Twitter, and 1 million people opted in to get their special outlet deals because it's useful information. But lots of other people sign up for stuff that's less direct response and much more branding-like, because they care about Starbucks. And Starbucks can send these little branding messages to them on a daily basis, multiple times a day basis, that are just make them feel something about Starbucks or remind them of Starbucks and ask them questions about Starbucks and get them to engage and maybe retweet and tell their friends about it. That is a new and compelling thing. Most of that we're making no money off of. So that's a thing we're figuring out. The promoted tweets, when people want a little lift for these messages, is useful, and that's how we're making money. But there's a tremendous amount of marketing and advertising going on in a medium that is opt-in and helpful to consumers and sits alongside the use model is exactly the same as the content, the entertainment, the friend messages, and everything else. And I don't know if that's possible in other mediums, but that blend is there, and it works.
Can we talk about mattresses again?
Please.
So, it's easy as a marketer, as a client, to be enamored with the characteristics of high-level advertising and to talk about branding as if it's an end to itself. But when you sit down with shoppers and you talk about their needs and what they're trying to accomplish, that the infomercial serves a lot of really important needs, as does something as particular as letting me know that the local Starbucks is doing some special, or they have an entertainment in a local way. This idea that somehow direct marketing is a low form of advertising that should be discounted in the face of brands, I guess shoppers reject. And as an ex-retailer who did a lot of really low form of advertising, I'm embarrassed to say, I think we got to step back and look at what the consumer is saying. So the needs that I have today as a shopper, when I'm making a decision, I got to give up my money, certainly compounded by the economy. But it's also more than that, right? The shopper walks in today with a laundry list of guilt-ridden, angst-ridden behaviors they bring with them. Is this product environmentally responsible? What are the economic indications of this? Am I employing some underage child in India? Is that a good thing? Or the fact that they're working in this factory, is that a bad thing? What are the environmental issues with the product, and how do I dispose of it? And certainly the health and safety issues when I put this product onto the dinner table or to hand it off to my children. And so you've got this incredibly lonely decision that's driven with so much more information, that's driven by so much more paranoia about making a great choice. And if a 30-minute infomercial at night helps me learn more about the bed, or that tweet gives me an indication of what's going on in my local marketplace, man, I'm going to subscribe to that because that made me smarter in the moment.
I agree.
From the media.
Just one more comment. So, if I step back and look at the utility, there's so much going on in utility in terms of new technology. If I look at the utility and the value that it drives in the moment, it's very easy to point to some sort of iPhone application and say that's utility, that's giving me information in the moment. If I step back and look at the shopper's journey end to end as just shopping, right? It's not like we think of it like pre-shopping and there's direct mail and then there's the low form of advertising like the packaging in the store and the hideous wobbler on the retailer shelf. But if I look at that as an end-to-end gestalt and the experience that the shopper goes as they go, I don't know what I need to do. And at the end of this, I've made a decision. To the extent that new media can help empower and inform and wrap that experience, man, we've got a winner.
From the media point of view, this is the problem. Direct marketing is low margin. It has never given us enough, essentially enough profit to create content. So direct marketing only pays for marketing. Brand marketing pays for something much larger, and we get to make great television shows and good magazines, and the environments that ultimately lead to high margin marketing. So what we've done by creating this direct medium is we've lowered everybody's opportunities.
One thing consumers have is they're time starved. And all of a sudden you have this ability with services like Twitter and mobile devices to, when I'm driving home and my son informs me he needs a new lacrosse stick, and I have no idea where to get a lacrosse stick, to real time understand, how do I find a store that has it? How do I get there? It knows my location. And I feel empowered.
You shouldn't be using your phone while you drive.
It's illegal in the state of California, so of course I'm not doing it. I'm asking my son to do it. But what I would say is that, you know, I feel like it's so freaking empowering. I mean, I feel like the ability to really take so much of the agony, and the reality is you can get so much more done. And for marketers to be thinking about how to take advantage of that real time, and I think this is kind of this Faustian debate of is it performance, or is it brand, or is it, you know, do I want to drive traffic to the stores? Most marketers that are out there that have major budgets, it's yes and yes and yes. They want to build a brand. They want to drive performance because they have some metrics, and most of them want to drive some kind of an action. So it's all of it.
Lauren?
I was just going to add another way of looking at this shopper marketing thing, which, by the way, is absolutely a fascinating new world of consumer insights and behaviors that go way beyond this thing called the demographic, which is over and, you know, really takes the newer form of that, which you guys referred to before, you know, the life stage approach, which is right on. But as people become better shoppers because there's more choice, I run this group at NBCU called the Women in Lifestyle Entertainment Group, and we do a tremendous amount of insights work on women in particular. And the stunning set of facts that I'm sure you guys all know is 85% of all consumer purchasing power, absolute dollars, in the United States today are driven by women. And it's clearly not just in the grocery aisle. You can't get to that number with that. It's technology, auto purchasing, financial services, financial planning, etc. And the best thing about the overwhelmed woman, mother, taking care of a sick parent, working, almost outnumbering men in the workforce, everybody's working, recession, is that most women are willing to do a lot of homework. And they like to be informed. And again, you can't blame or credit the technology. If the care circle, the sewing circle, whatever it's been for a long time, that circle just got a lot bigger in a hurry. And they're not afraid to ask for advice, and when they get their opinion, best stat out of the 85% stat is when women decide, at the moment they decide they like that product, the first thing they do is not decide to buy it. 96% of those women who can identify that time that they decide to like the product want to tell, quote unquote, everyone they know that they like the product. And that's such an open way that I would just say that direct marketing now works both ways. And that work
We're in violent agreement, absolutely.
right? So it's just an evolution, and I just wouldn't get stuck on the thing. You know, we did, I'm actually getting a lot of research from iVillage, which has this passionate 30+ million unique audience a month. That's a lot of women. 20,000 brand mentions a month on iVillage. We went and found out all about that. But our best and most innovative partnerships as big, old, soon-to-be dead, moribund media has been with Twitter, the groundbreaking first to the table, first media brand on Twitter, first media brand on Foursquare. So I'm just saying, don't blame or credit the technology at that moment. You know, do what you're supposed to do. Whatever you feel like you've been put on the face of the earth for, go serve it wherever it is. So I just think that the whole shopper marketing thing and the technology is so fantastic, but, you know, maybe not the beginning and the end.
I think one of the things we've all touched on without being explicit is the notion of digital data. We've talked a lot about how we want to market in this new age or what the role media plays. But one of the most interesting things we now have in front of us is an extraordinary amount of digital data. We're not online anymore, we're digital. Whether that digital is the way we use our phones or ultimately interactive television, it's going to be very difficult to distinguish digital and non-digital as we go forward. It's more a question of how we want to use that information to make our efforts more meaningful or create value in that digital data chain. Example, we talk about a customer journey. It's not really a sequential, I become aware, I consider, I buy. It's more like the term in mathematics, a random walk, where I might hear about something, I might go talk to my friends, I might go have some fun, later on I might actually buy it without even thinking about it. How do we as marketers and as media understand that new random walk? How do we use the data that all of us collectively have about everything from what people are searching on all the way to what people are tweeting, to what people are reading, to what people are writing? Because the next generation of how we create value is going to be to take that data, wherever it comes from, and use it to inform the way we spend our time and the way we create experiences in virtual real time. And I don't believe this distinction of old and new media is going to remain relevant. It's going to be the way we take all of our channels and take our digital insight and data and ultimately make that connection. It's not direct marketing necessarily. It could be building my brand because I've identified who's really interested in that product somewhere else.
I think one thing that Lauren said that really rang true to me was this notion that the lifestyles we're living today are so hectic and so full that the knitting circle and the book club and the coffee time among women are not happening as much. And those conversations have moved online. And those conversations are public now. So it gets back to the comment about more data. So those conversations actually exist. They exist in the forums and iVillage. How many brand mentions?
Over 20,000 a month.
Because think about it, 20,000 a month. And I don't know if you're doing this yet. I hope you are. Is if you could turn those brand mentions into marketing opportunities for those brands, even if they're negative brand mentions, just to be part of those conversations. Could never do that before. A brand could never show up at the knitting circle and say, I'm here now, let's be part of this conversation. I think that's huge, and that's native to the medium. That's not running a banner ad, that's not running a pre-roll. And that, I think, is where the action is.
I will say that yesterday we announced this thing called the Women at NBCU Brand Power Index. And it's probably very clumsy, and we were overwhelmed by this incredible and unique set of data. That is the first time we've experienced it. So we sought to make an index, just a market mover index of the old thing called word of mouth. And one data stream is person to person, actual word of mouth that we can capture. Online mentions, right? Just straight up web 2.0 mentions. And the third data stream is social media mentions. So these are the three newish ways outside of the book club, knitting circle, care circle, that we found were the most consistent and high-powered data streams. And we indexed them and just made a list of the most mentioned and the quickest movers up or down, because you want to know why all of a sudden something is going up or down. And the first of all, we announced it, and the top 20 brands called and said, why am I number X, and am I up or down, and what are they saying? And the greatest piece that Fred points to is that a couple of years ago, people were loath to enter the space because of the fear of lack of control, right? Well, what if they say something bad? What if I plunk this new can of whatever product into the online knitting circle and they hate it? And the thing that I think marketers and product people and human beings have gotten to a point of is saying, I can have a dialogue with this hateful product, and if you can convert me back even a little bit, then you don't even have like a fast mover up the index. You have a brand proselytizer who will be like a virus in the positive way to then tell those, that whole circle how they feel.
Well, this is all great. I mean, this is a great vision, and direct is a great vision, and relationships are a great vision. All this sounds great. How come nobody's paying for it? I mean, let's get to the bottom here, and the real issue is that we can define the hell out of this and define the advantages of it, but in the marketplace, the market is saying, this is certainly not worth what it used to be.
So let's stay on that. So Fred, I was actually going to point to you.
I don't think that's exactly what's going on. You don't have to pay for it, okay? The truth is that so much of this opportunity is free if you just participate in the medium. It's what Ev said, right? Most of the advertising that happens on Twitter is free because the marketers don't have to pay for it. Think about Craigslist, okay? Craigslist is a $100 million business, wildly profitable, and it has basically collapsed a $16 billion classified ad industry. Why? Because most of what's on Craigslist is free. You don't need to pay for it.
And that's
But
fine.
it's not.
That's a reasonable view of this.
It's not free because I don't think that marketing budgets are going up. CEOs aren't giving CMOs more money, and as a CMO, you're sitting there saying, "I now have to do this stuff." But I'm not necessarily writing a check, but I need people. I'm employing agencies. So this idea that it's free, there is opportunity cost in that. So I don't think it's a completely.
I think you're right.
But
I think what's happened is
that
we've moved from media buys to media execution. So the dollars are flowing to a different place, and we're seeing it as the dollars aren't flowing, but they're flowing. They're just flowing differently.
Well, even if this is true, that it works at a much lower cost. I mean, we still have an economic conundrum here of a business that used to be this big and is now this big, which sort of says we all ought to get out of it because it's shrinking, and also it says something really profound about the future, which is that we don't have a growing business, we don't have something that is going to replace what was, that we're involved in a transformation to. Certainly for the media business to nowhere.
But Michael, didn't the media business at a certain point say, right, when the first banner ad ran in Wired magazine, wasn't that the media business to an extent saying, this is all about the content, and content is king, to Andrew's point, right? And we're going to have this big page of text and this little tiny banner ad at the top. And then now, fast forward to several years later, we're saying, gee, the web isn't a great advertising medium in the way we'd ideally like. The dollars aren't flowing. Well, if I look at a print copy of Wired, it's a really good advertising medium. They're big, full-color ads. But there's no equivalent in the experience, the web experience of reading Wired.
Well, okay, so in other words, what you're saying is that the people who have created this new medium have for some reason not been able to respond to marketing exigencies, to create something that really works. And so in that regard, it's true. All other media has been created by marketers. Suddenly this media is created by technologists, to your point about Facebook.
Well, and editorial
not set up as an advertising medium.
I think we should just get some facts straight. We talk about digital media isn't growing. It's just not true. It's not true. So if you just look at the facts of the situation, all other media, if you go back and you look at the last several years, I'm talking about the US, probably is true on a global basis, is percentage of eyeballs going to other media is going down, percentage of eyeballs going to digital is going up. If you look at how they're spending their ad budgets are going down in other media, they're going up in digital. So, I mean, we can talk about the fact that share isn't shifting,
Well, yeah,
but
they're
shifting.
going up, but per eyeball, they're spending less.
Yeah.
So that's the crucial metric there.
And total media consumption is going up. So I wouldn't parse it like there's, the thing that is so transformational is that people think that these 24 hours in a day is one pie chart driven by sleeping and media, right? That's always how we break up my PowerPoint slides. There's sleeping, and then there's media consumption. And so you need Venn diagrams now, okay, in my boardroom charts. And so total media consumption is going, I went to the Yankee game on Saturday. They lost. It's terrible. But in the new Yankee Stadium, there's awesome, national, decades-old, beautiful brand advertising, and there's Joe's Hardware Store, Frank's Bank, and 1-800-Mattress, right? It's just the perfect, like, you get 55,000 people, many of them are the same every game, and you have the biggest and the most local. And I think that that balance has, our television advertising hasn't changed too much either. Very few people ever thought, like, I won't have 4 commercial pods an hour, I'm just gonna do one big one. No one ever did that.
This is why the only place media people can really go on vacation is Cuba.
What is going to be, how are you going to finance great content in this model that we're talking about? Let's shift a little bit here.
Well, I think what I see my kids doing is buying a lot of television. And I'm not suggesting that the television is going to become a totally paid product, because I don't think that's true. And I think, as many people have said, television advertising is fantastic. You can tell a message, in television that you can't tell in any other medium. But I also see my kids just going and buying shows on iTunes or watching movies on Netflix, and they're paying for that experience. And I really believe that we're going to see more and more of that kind of behavior. I think these subscription models are going to work. Maybe not in newspapers, don't know about magazines, but I definitely think in video content, expensive, highly produced, high quality content, even inexpensive, high quality content,
Yes.
People will pay for it.
But even that model, that's going to be a troubling model, because even if they do pay for it, you're not going to achieve the levels the revenue levels that we achieved when these were mass market advertising opportunities.
Depends who you mean when you say we.
Right, there's a lot of components to the we. I view it as, more societal than the dollars to dimes argument, or the, social media versus new media, whatever that means, marketplace. I view it as, I think a lot of us have kids of varying ages on this panel, and, our kids may not be 100% representative of the country's kids or the world's kids, but we have this little sample and we have to engage with them all the time, and that's why I know as an iVillage runner now that moms are actually the fastest adopters to media, because they gotta keep track of those kids. Where are you? Tell me, show me. I'm gonna pick you up at 3:15. But the societal element is the phrase, back to one of the setup questions. I think the phrase for the future is that these kids are addicted to choice, right? And if you can capture an addiction in society, you're the pusher man, right? And the old adage on the schoolyard is you give them a little taste for free and then you got them. So I think that right now we're testing giving them a little taste for free, but they're addicted to The Office, so they gotta buy it on Hulu. There's an argument, is it $1.99 or 99 cents on iTunes? Whatever the argument is, the fact is that this addiction to choice is the new market, and everyone will get in line as a content creator. And
Of course, addiction to choice is a contradiction. It means you're not addicted. I mean, this is
You're
like,
just
that's the
addicted
problem with
to-
you have a-
No, Michael, they are addicted. They are addicted. They're addicted to choice. They want that show on their laptop so that it's with them wherever they are when they want to watch it. They are addicted to the show, I can assure you.
Control might be a better
And
word,
I,
actually.
and I think it's also about time and a sense of time. It's not just choice. It's about wanting what I want, exactly where I want it, and when I want it.
I don't mean choice by what
Right.
is it. I mean when, where, what, if,
So, but
how.
the rituals are
And
changing.
this is
The
all
rituals are
great,
changing.
and this is all true, and this is all a byproduct. I mean, one of the great byproducts of technology. But it's not good for a business model. Choice is bad for media in terms of media making as much money as it possibly
Right.
can.
Another way to say that is that, I'm sorry, there's been a comfortable oligopoly that essentially has been the working model for content creators and marketers for decades, and now that oligopoly is sort of threatened and crumbling.
It's like the music business. Music business has never been better for bands than right now. It's terrible for record companies, but guess what? They were incredibly inefficient, right? I pay for ESPN. I'm not a sports fan, right? I pay for that and I subsidize everybody else's watching of ESPN. How long can that go on?
Evan?
Well, the choice question thought about another way is the reason, of course it's not going to work as well because people didn't have a choice before but to sit back and watch the TV commercial. And now they're not only buying content, they're TiVoing it, and given the choice, they'll skip the damn commercials. They don't like those as much. And given that there's infinite media to consume, they're not going to waste time on stuff they don't want, and that's the marketing messages. So that's just a fact. They're no longer a captive audience. So yeah, it's going to make less money.
But I think when you think about it, it really, we've talked about paid versus not paid, and we talk about highly produced video and entertainment. I think consumers have always thought that they paid for that. They went to the movie theaters, they were paying for that. I think when it comes to
Well,
news.
they didn't think that on network television.
They did on network television, but I
Since
think
the dawn
that,
of cable, though, they've been paying for
yeah,
network.
they've been paying in different modes. I would say there's a big distinction, I'm trying to make a different distinction, which is between entertainment content and news and information, where I think for the most part, consumers have always felt that they were paying for the delivery to their doorstep, or they were paying for the magazine to be delivered to their homes. And so there's not a consumer mindset that they've been paying for that. Now, what's interesting about it in terms of, to your point, they want to skip the advertising. If you look at most of the women's magazine, the most popular issue is the September magazines. Why is it the most popular issue? It has the most advertising, and people are actually buying those magazines. My husband will say to me, why, that's all ads. And my point is exactly right. You know, I want to see those ads. And so I think as we think about these models and where it works and where it doesn't work is, you know, where will they pay? Where is the advertising so compelling to me that, you know, I'm actually buying something to get those ads?
Yeah, but
I have to
aren't
interrupt. The
they
September issue of
advertising-
Vogue, the September issue, the famous September issue, now a beautiful movie. I think that is just a classic media chicken and egg thing. There's more advertising in it because it editorially covers the trends for the year, so it gained more. I mean, that's what
And also
Sunday would
it has
say.
more readers in it too. So advertisers are going to the readers, not the other way around.
But the consumer likes it.
Right, I'm saying that there's no barrier just because it's thicker
Right.
because of ads and the same number of editorial pages. There's no barrier to that. I would also just say that there's something amazing about the power of consumers, which is that people don't buy the cheapest of everything, right? Poor people have to. Recession-struck people do more. But, you know, having built many businesses on the absolutely arbitrary and fungible and sometimes, not often, manipulatable vagaries of consumer behavior, nobody needs a $700 pair of shoes. Not one person in the whole world needs a $700 pair of shoes. You should buy 70 pairs of shoes for $10, obviously. So, obviously. So I'm saying there's also, like, people pay for stuff at different times in industrial and consumer behavior times that don't really make any sense. Sometimes it's quality, sometimes it's beauty, sometimes it's advertising, sometimes it's because a big star carries it. And so you want to put all these consumers into boxes. It's when they surprise you and lead you that is often helpful to look at.
So Laura, one quick second. We're in the home stretch, so we do want to take some questions from you. So we'll let Laura make her point, and then we do have a couple of microphones. So if you would be brave enough to raise your hand and ask a question, you're on deck. Go ahead.
Often now people talk about paid, owned, and earned media. We have not mentioned it yet this morning. Paid being that which I bought and I could get my reach or my eyeballs. Owned being the places where I, as a marketer, could actually connect. For example, it might be my own website, it might be my own email list, it might be anything that I could control. And then earned, which is those things that there are many definitions, but whether it's word of mouth or social or things that are shared. And one of the challenges I believe we all have as marketers is how do we think about allocating investment of people and marketing dollars across these, because they are no longer discrete. And as we think about how we are going to connect with consumer behavior, it's a combination. the financial models and economic models of the paid part of the media equation have to change. But how valuable owned and earned are and how they work together is going to be an important part of how that value is recreated as we go forward. And I think that all of us are going to be learning how to bring those together in different ways. They're no longer discrete. And I think that's a really important part of how we're going to be marketing.
Okay, wait 1 second, sir, to get a microphone, please. If you wouldn't mind identifying yourself, and if there's somebody particularly want to answer the question, say so.
Sure. Hi, my name is Tom Kurz, and I'm a co-publisher of the escapistmagazine.com. We're sort of a games and geek culture rag in the new media space. So my question, or I guess comment, goes first out to Michael, who I'm a big fan of, and but to the whole panel, I guess, for comment. That is that I think in the past, advertising dollars spent on television or on billboards or on magazines have been driven by traffic, really just traffic, like, you know, how many people are tuning in and how many people are driving by a billboard or what have you. And so you have this internet medium created by technologists, and all of a sudden we have technology companies going out there and saying, well, we're going to tell you how advertising works. And so we're judging advertising in a way on the internet in ways that we don't judge advertising for any of the other mediums. And so people go ahead and they spend money in the mediums where they don't have to explain why or show results. And then at the same time, we're looking for results from internet advertising that really don't reflect how people use the advertising. So I think you have a situation where the money hasn't accelerated into the online space at the same way that it was with other mediums, because we're calling this new medium to the mat and asking online ads to behave in a way that we haven't asked of anybody else. And so, if we accept the adage that 90 or 95% of advertising blows, and then we go ahead and we say, oh, and we also have to measure its success online, it just takes a little longer for it to, I think, for the dollars to go in. We still haven't figured out, what's the best way to message online. But it's clear to me the money has to go there. I just think we're holding it, and it's the agencies and the technology companies that I actually think need to take a look at what are we really doing to ourselves. Why are we holding ourselves hostage by this sort of measurement that we don't use for anything else? So if anybody wants to comment on that.
One of the interesting things is that we've also we've jerry-rigged this notion of eyeballs. I mean, this notion of eyeballs and of measured audiences comes from old media, and then we've adapted it into this new media, in which we have all of these new techniques and I think questionable techniques of moving audiences. So we suddenly have most of our audiences visiting most brands are there because they don't know why they're there. They're there because Google suddenly put them there. So they don't know why they're there. They don't know where they are. They don't know what they're reading. They don't know what kind of context this is. The entire experience becomes an atomized one. So we're delivering these audiences that are, I would argue, fundamentally low value audiences.
Sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
No, I think why do we do it? Because we can. I mean, why do we have this measurement system? Because we can. But the challenge for media companies, to me, is that, and this is back to the economic model, we need content to put that ad over to get the click. What you're starting to see, and that we've sort of touched on branded content, but you're going to see it with news, I think, is that effectively, as media owners, you want the news that's going to generate the most clicks. So do you start creating content and going into different directions because you're driven by this metric as well? So I think there's a slightly more dangerous problem in terms of, as media owners and thinking of content, and there's a very interesting company called Demand Media, which absolutely takes this algorithm thought to its end conclusion, which is we will only write things that will give us a higher ranking and a higher click on
And those
websites.
are all people, and we've tricked everyone to come because we've SEO'd the hell out of this, and that's our real.
I'm not sure it's a trick, but you know, if someone's searching something and that's at the top, for whatever reason.
Right, but you hire a cheap freelancer who puts Lindsay Lohan in the headline, and that's your business model.
Well, one of the interesting things is, it all sounds so diabolical to me. I actually want to just come back to the idea that there's a lot of goodness in it for the consumer now. So if you just take the real-time information we have at Yahoo, we can tell during the Olympics what people are searching on. So if it's downhill racing and there's a lot of red marks on the snow, and they're really trying to understand what that's about, we can see it in the searches. So all of a sudden you have an ability to real time be able to surface the content that people care most about. We recently acquired a company, Associated Content, which has 390,000 contributors, and it's an assignment desk in which we can create the assignments. There's both real editors as well as a set of algorithms that help us understand the quality of what's created. And so when you think about a consumer who now wants really relevant experience, they want the most relevant news, sports, finance, and entertainment, which we can give them the headlines and we can
Yeah,
but they have to trust you.
Content.
They have to trust you.
Well,
It comes back to a brand.
I would
You're just
argue.
debasing the whole experience, and so what we're doing is creating a medium which is not going to return for us because everybody's going to say, you know,
If it's
this is
relevant to
crap.
me, if it's relevant to me and you're giving me information I care about, and the way brands get created, so let's just take Fred's
Listen,
blog
I can
that he
see,
creates.
I know how fast those people leave that stuff, and it's not relevant to them, and they don't want it, and they're not grateful
Note
for
note
it.
the last vestiges of civility crumbling in the waning moments. Trevor.
Yeah, well, you said in your question something like 90% or 95% of advertising blows, and you also brought up data. Look, I would say some advertising blows more than others, right? So if you take that as a given and you actually look at data about what advertising people like and don't like, by the way, I would warrant 99% of branded content blows.
I would
right? That's
advocate
the
that
worst
90
of
to
all.
95% of everything blows.
Yeah,
So
good
what?
point. But I think you have to, what frustrates me and what I kind of keep throwing at Michael and to a lesser extent Paul is the idea that in some media, the difference between the September issue of Vogue and everything else we're talking about, and there's no black market, right, in copies of Vogue with all the ads ripped out, is that Tom Florio, and I presume whoever his successor is, I don't know, really curates that group of ads. He actually considers it part of the editorial product. On television, people spend a fortune on broadcast graphics, on shows, on branding the network, on advertising the network. But when the ads come on, too many television broadcasters throw their hands up and say, well, that's not part of what we're meant to control or influence. Same thing happens on the web. There's sort of a slot there, and whatever the ad serving company pushes in there is what winds up there. And too few online publishers say, how do I make advertising with my advertising partners in here that's going to be entertaining and have value to my user base? If that would happen, I think we'd feel a lot less that it blows. And if you look at data, consumers actually tend to like richer, more animated, more interactive, higher bandwidth advertising. They hate banner ads, but we don't really react to that on the publishing side as much as we should.
Fred?
No, I don't have anything to add.
I'm
to
sorry,
this.
I thought I saw you a lean forward position. Over here, yes, go ahead. You're on.
Okay, yeah, I'm not going to mention the company I'm with. My name's Sam. Hi, everybody. I have to say that this gentleman over here mentions that that we're being forced to measure online advertising in a way that's not exactly the way the user responds. And just as an example, you know, people talking about how everybody hates these banner ads. My company gets behind the data and actually looks at this stuff. And people don't hate banner ads, and people actually do respond. I think the agencies are doing a horrible job responding to it. We're actually seeing the data and presenting it to the companies and their clients.
And the question is, why?
I guess the question is what realm, maybe the Laura from Digitas can answer. Well, what ways are you guys going to answer with the data and to give these clients a better understanding of what's going on from their advertising online? I'm sorry.
Couple of answers to that question. There were several things in it. The first one is, what are we doing with data to make the entire advertising experience more valuable and have more impact? And I hear two lines of discussion. One is, how do I make it more entertaining? How do I make it more interesting for me as a consumer? And the other is, how do I make it work better for an advertiser? Because one of the dirty little secrets everyone in this room knows is sometimes advertising does not have to be entertaining to work, right? It just has to be very specific and very direct. And we may not like it may not be creative, it may not look beautiful, but it works. And I think for all of us in the industry, our challenge is as follows. We still have to make it work. And we have data that we've now automated. In fact, one of the things that is possible now, and Digitas is out in the forefront of this, is to take all of this data that's so overwhelming, bring it together in an automated fashion, and pull out those things that really matter so you can make a different marketing decision. But more interesting is to say, how do I use that same data to understand what matters to people so that I can actually create, and often dynamically create, different kinds of content? Some of which I will be paying for very specifically as branded content that's developed, and some of which I may have already. And I'm just going to reassemble it in a very dynamic way. And we are doing that today for many of our clients. So for example, something we did in the early days with Yahoo for Delta Airlines. We knew, based on who was searching or who was visiting a certain site, where the travel patterns of those people were, whether they were Delta Sky Miles members, so that we could actually serve to them information in a banner ad about a fare sale. If you lived in the Northeast, a cheap flight from New York to Orlando, something very relevant. Changed the economics of Delta Airlines, and it actually changed the value that people saw in the advertising. Because advertising is often a service. It is not always a push message. So the short answer is data is going to unlock a next generation of creativity. Data is going to have to be managed because there's too much of it. We won't be able to act, we'll be frozen. And so we're going to have to say, how are we going to take that data, automate it, and use it, which is something that as you mentioned, Digitas is in the forefront of. And ultimately, how are we going to understand when it's time to engage with content, and when are we going to use the opportunities to talk to people to use more traditional push advertising messages? And we have to get better at all of that.
Up there.
Hi, my name is Mitch Spolin. I'm the head of sales for Yahoo. I know a lot of you up there. So I wanted to ask a question. So I heard a lot of discussion about how in some situations it would be irresponsible to recommend branding on the internet. And you know, as I think and I listen to, you know, advertising for me is always simple. It's like how advertising is about influencing people's behavior at the root of it. And it can be, as I agree with a lot of the commentary about how banners it has such a negative connotation, it has such an association with what advertising on the web is, to which it really shouldn't. So as we've redesigned the web and changed the creative canvas, and it allowed for storytelling on the web, we've seen unbelievable impact. So my question is pretty simple. So last week, I'd love to hear your feedback, because last week CBS took over Yahoo in many respects. Yahoo TV took over the login page of Yahoo, which is a brand new creative canvas, took over the homepage, and they owned the week to drive people, tell their stories, preview their shows, drive them to television to watch that night. And when I checked, not only did the days that these messages run, that every show spiked in terms of search behavior, not only the network, but the actors and actresses, they won every time slot that they were advertising in. So that influenced people's behavior to tune in that night. So if we're using online to drive to an offline vehicle, clearly it has to work.
So your point is that internet advertising works. I think we would all agree with you.
For building brands specifically.
Yeah, no, the only comment I made was, we were talking a lot about the post-advertising world. The only comment I made was it might be irresponsible to say, in all cases, only do internet advertising. That's, I would agree with that as well. Yeah.
Take one more question, then we're going to wrap up here. Up here. You got a lot of people who want to ask questions. Give somebody the microphone. We'll have one more question. All right, there you go. What's that? All right, you want to do a couple more? Fine. What's that? 2 minutes. 2? Well, really quick question, no speech. If it's not quick, don't do it.
It won't, no speech, but the future of media, what's the government's role, if there is any role?
I didn't hear the question.
What is the government's role in the future of media, if there's any role? Can somebody want to give
It could be a 2-hour topic.
Yeah.
I was going to say, is there a 140-character answer to that?
Yeah, I'll give you an answer. They should simply mandate that no distribution network can control what content the consumer can see and cannot see. Net neutrality, that's all we need.
Some anti-farm bill legislation would be good too.
But the real answer, it will be a big role, probably ever growing, ever bigger.
And around privacy. Privacy is the big thing, particularly with this administration.
I think they should stay out
Well,
of it.
as you can tell from this last exchange, there are probably many more issues that we didn't get into than we did or were able to, even though we had a lot of time and a lot of people. It's an enormously complex issue. It'll be interesting to come back next year and see. And I noticed that we didn't hear any hard and fast predictions, but we did get into some trends. I think there was consensus around the notion of a vastly empowered consumer and how her behavior and her desire to connect in her own networks is going to change the business of everybody here. But how that plays out for companies big and small is still something that's ahead of us. I wanted to thank all the panelists for their generosity and their willingness to engage in this dialogue. And thank you.